toxic. Ravens call a different way if wolves are in the area. That if you burn rhododendron leaves, they give off cyanide gas. That you can dye your skin brown with green walnuts. He grasps a fistful of wild lavender and crushes it to his nose. He uses this, he says, to cover his tracks. Before, he wore a set of clothes which he'd left in a barn with some sheep. But he soon realised, when he started interacting with people, they found the smell rather offensive. Now, with the lavender, he can hide from the animals while smelling quite pleasant. Along with shepherding, hunting and tracking, Troy restores old buildings. He gestures towards a hamlet perched vertiginously on a cliff top. Since I started doing up chapels around here, he says, I've had drunken meals with 6 mayors. I wouldn't even know how to see a mayor in England. He admits to me that he talks a lot and blames this on spending a lot of time on his own. However, he struggles when trying to describe what it was like to look into the eyes of a wolf. I wasn't at all scared, he says, but there was no way I could break the gaze. It was weird, hypnotic.
Claire Marshall in the Alps in southern France. Next, a spot of mudlarking on African shores. You've probably heard plenty about the loss of rainforest around the world and the chain of ecological consequences it brings. Yet, a natural habitat doesn't have to be as obviously dramatic as a jungle to be valuable. From windswept desert to Arctic tundra, each environment supports its own complex web of life. On the coast of Senegal in West Africa, Daniel Owen has been talking to one man who's doing his best to keep hope, fish and his community alive by tending to some remarkable trees. There's even the chance to get his feet wet.
Stepping through the mud, Abdul Karim introduces the stands of trees as though we're strolling through a community allotment. These are from this year, those are from 2014. Those over there, they were planted in 2013, he says, waving his arm to indicate which stand is which. We are in the mangroves in the backwaters of Joal, a town in Senegal about 2 hours drive south of Dakar. Joal is best known as a fishing town. Each afternoon, open boats called pirogues arrive at its beach to offload their catches of herring, sardine and other sea fish. They've come from several miles offshore. The beach becomes alive with activity associated with the catch. Porters carrying heavy crates of silvery fish up the shore, horses and carts splashing through the shallows, people buying and selling, and noise everywhere. But behind Joal, away from the hustle and bustle of commerce, there is a quieter world, the backwaters and the mangroves. To experience this estuarine world properly requires a shallow draft boat, a skilled boatman, and the right tides, and of course, a knowledgeable guide. On the morning of our visit, the sun is already high, it's approaching low tide, and our guide is Abdul Karim's son. Originally a fisherman, Abdul Karim still goes to sea, but his main occupation
Engine operating temperature has been reached.
Much of the time, he campaigns on behalf of his fellow fishermen for a sustainable future for the offshore fishery. But he also exudes a zeal for environmental protection, which extends to the help of the local mangroves. These tangled trees, which grow in shallow salt water and line the muddy channels of the backwaters, are not towering or majestic, but they are crucial as a nursery area for fish and as a habitat for oysters and other shellfish. Over the years, some parts of the mangrove forest have suffered. Droughts drove up water salinity, which led to mangrove dieback over large areas. More recently, mangrove trees in some parts have been harvested for fuel wood, to heat cooking pots at home, and also to smoke the sardinella on a semi-industrial scale at a site nearby. Climate change may also be having an effect. Abdul Karim's response has been to jump to the tree's assistance by mimicking natural processes. Mangrove trees produce a seed called a propagule. When it's mature, this spear-like 6-inch long structure drops off the parent plant into the sea to be carried around by the tides. A few of these hardy seeds will settle upright in the mud at low tide and then grow. Abdul Karim wants more of them to find their feet in the estuary. As we walk across the mud, feeling it slip between our toes, Abdul Karim snaps off propagules and gathers them in his hand, like a bunch of asparagus spears. He does this almost automatically, but he is a man of intent. glistening mud. On the edge of more mature stands grow baby mangrove trees about knee-high, slender stems poking out of the grey ooze, each with a little neat crown of waxy leaves. They look as if they've established themselves naturally, but that is an illusion. These are from last year, he says proudly. But establishing mangroves needs many hands. Abdul explains that much of the planting has been done by local women, fisherfolk and schoolchildren. The children work for pocket money during the holidays, squads of willing hands sticking propagills into the mud in neat rows. It's the simplest of tasks, but the impressive results are there to see for anyone who takes the trip into the watery world of wide horizons and mudfields behind Jebel. Now it is our turn. No pocket money for us, but a keen sense of satisfaction as we each plant propagills a metre or so apart in a straight line drawn by Abdul with a stick dragged across the mud. Returning to our boat after a couple of hours involves some considerable wading. Mangrove leaves drift by us in the tidal currents. Small fish skitter across the water's surface, pursued no doubt by something bigger underneath. And egrets hunt in the shallows. This habitat is essential for the well-being of many fisherfolk at Jebel. Not so much those landing the sardinella, but the ones using small nets in the estuarine waters or harvesting the shellfish encrusting the mangrove tree's roots. Abdul is not alone in protecting the mangroves, but his is one of just a handful of voices arguing for this goal. The backwaters may be a quieter, softer world than the daily spectacle of many tons of silvery sardinella being landed on a beach, but the committed work of people like Abdul will help ensure that the mangrove's quiet, nurturing role in the natural affairs of Jebel has a clear and prominent voice in the town.
And that was Daniel Irwin. Now, the last thing you want on holiday is a medical emergency. It happened to Anne Flaherty when she was in China recently with her family. They were visiting the so-called Green City of Nanning, close to the border with Vietnam. Like so many other cities in China, it's a rapidly expanding place. 6 million people live there. Many of them fear becoming ill because if they need medical treatment, they're going to have to pay for it.
The Chinese have a proverb which says that every journey begins with a single step. In my case, that single step would prove one too far. It was pouring with rain. Great grey clouds covered the mountains and dwarfed the skyscrapers. Sheets of lightning competed with the neon of the new designer shops. We were bored and desperately in need of lunch. Spotting a cafe near our hotel, we made a run for it. Holding my umbrella aloft, I launched myself onto the newly cobbled street. Suddenly, my body upended as my foot slipped. I felt the weight hit the ground, my head thumping hard. I heard gasps all around. I touched my head. There was blood gushing everywhere, down my neck and face and onto my clothes. "Oh God, I'm going to die," I shouted. I pulled myself upright, and my husband, never shy of melodrama himself, clutched me and whispered, "You're not. We're going to take you to the hospital. You're going to be okay." People stared as I dripped my bloody way through the shopping mall and back to our hotel. A young man followed, anxious to help. Staff rushed over as we entered the lobby. I was swaddled in towels to soak up the blood. Cold tea was offered while everyone discussed the best plan. "A taxi was quicker than calling an ambulance," said someone. Within minutes, we five, me holding my head, my two scared children, my husband, and a staff member from the hotel called Season, squeezed into a taxi and into the downtown traffic. Season said she hoped we had money to pay for the treatment. A cacophony of noise awaited us at Nanning University Hospital. Crying children, adults bleeding from head wounds, people comforting babies who objected to having needles poked into them, and yet there was a quiet air of efficiency. 3 young nurses took my temperature and blood pressure. Then Season smiled and told my husband to get his money out. The system is pay as you go. For tests, x-rays, stitches, medicine, you pay first before any treatment. I sat waiting beside a young woman with a bloody nose and injured arm. We exchanged sympathetic looks, both of us feeling sorry for ourselves. After 15 minutes, I was ushered into the treatment room, where a man was having a huge head wound stitched. A young doctor wordlessly looked at my wound and applied disinfectant. Another, slightly older one,